Hi everyone, I'm Harv, Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and this is Stuff That Matters Now. Hey guys, welcome back. I am in Te Awanga today, catching up with Maria King. Good afternoon, Maria.
Hey, Harv.
And we've also, in the room, we've got Eva down the end there. Eva's not feeling a hundy, and she's looking at us going, what random old people looking at us? Eva's off school. She had a touch of COVID, possibly, but the test came back and she's clear. She's just got a
She's
thing.
not the source of the wastewater
She's
positive results in Te Awanga.
Eva's new nickname is Wastewater. Yeah. Maria, thank you for your time, because we know that's really precious and we're going to touch on that today.
Okay.
And Eva, Maria said, why would you talk to me? And I'm going, yeah, exactly, why would we talk to you? For lots of reasons. And I've been trying to get out of Maria, what are you, Maria? How do you describe yourself?
Well, I think we were just talking about the chameleon before, weren't we? So perhaps there's part of that too. It's always difficult to describe what I am or what I do because I'm not one thing. So recently, Venture Centre actually asked me the same question, and the only thing I could come up with was multi-hyphenate, which kind of means you list out a whole load of things and put hyphens between them all. So it's interesting because there's so many different industries and different skills that I have that I bring into one place. It's hard to give a one-word answer. So what am I? I'm a mother. I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. Hate the word, but use it. I am a director. I don't know.
And
so many things.
And what space, to give context, what space are you working in at the moment?
Most of the time is, new technologies, disruptive technologies that will have positive impact on people and place. And I'm doing that in my own companies, more in deep technology, disruption to existing industries, and in my governance roles, they're varied, but they've all got significantly positive impacts to have on the planet and on the people who live on the planet. So it's all around. It's all heart-centred. It's all impact for good. I don't know, Harv. It's hard to describe. I'm not very good at it. Maybe I need some help.
I'm just loving watching you struggle.
I'm
through
squirming. It's really difficult.
Fabulous. I love watching that. And the reason I love watching that, Maria, is that you make me squirm more than just about anybody else. So the disclaimer here is Maria and I in the same Collective Intelligence team.
Yep.
And just about every meeting, I look across the room at Maria and go, why don't you just bugger off and leave me alone? Maria, so let's... And what makes this really interesting is that you're a Northland girl off a dairy farm.
I am. And
you're pretty proud of that.
Oh, very, because it taught me so much. Yeah, about who I am and how I can rely on myself. And I don't even question that, ever. Can I achieve something? Can I do it? Can I do it myself? Can I figure out a way? Always. Never question it.
And your nickname as a kid was?
MacGyver. I've always been able to fix things or put something together that doesn't look like it should be put together to create a solution. And I don't think that stops now, but it's just not so much random. It may seem random, but if you're pulling in disparate information that you've learned from across different industries or different roles or different conversations, you can come up with something new all the time, and that's the innovative piece. And it doesn't always get you out of a pickle, and it doesn't always need a bomb. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
And so when you were saying that, you epitomise the Kiwi ingenuity thing, and you're really smart, right? And I know that's uncomfortable, but it did take me a little while to work out just how smart you were over a wide range of areas. When did you start knowing that you had that gift?
I don't know if I really understood it myself. Maybe not until I actually walked away from my audiology profession, or maybe it was starting to become clear to me during that time. It's interesting, isn't it? I've asked myself the same question, and I've just always liked to learn. I mean, it's a big part of my life, and I love to read. and I probably, if I could, I'd be a permanent university student.
Same.
I'd have a degree in everything. And I used to really annoy my sister. She won't mind me saying, she's like, you could do anything, you're good at everything. And it used to really frustrate her, I think. But it never occurred to me that no one else was the same. I think there's loads of people who are the same, but I probably just assumed everyone was just like me.
And look, there's lots of generalists out there, Maria, but they don't have your intellect that comes with it. And look, I'm not going to piss in your pocket all.
Don't have to.
Conversation. But I think you're a really interesting mix, right? And because you've got the country rural values.
Yep.
And you're working in this deep tech space.
That's true, but I'm also working often in that community space too. And I think, going back to the dairy farming piece, I think when you live in those small rural communities and you're quite a distance from larger cities, you don't have all the things at your fingertips. You rely on each other, and it doesn't matter your age, your gender, what you're like as a person in terms of personality. Introvert, extrovert is irrelevant. You're dependent on that community for that support. And I hadn't, again, understood how important that was also in careers and in business, and being able to learn how to work and interact and get the best out of everybody, no matter their backgrounds or their interests specifically. If you were coming together around something that mattered, everybody pulled together. And I think that's becoming more and more prevalent now in industry everywhere, is that perspective of build the community at the grassroots level, and CQ's a great example of that, understanding how that works and how that all meshes, and then the results, the fruits of that labour come out later, and they're brilliant. It's not a solo game.
What were you like at school? Like school for you, did your X factor show up there?
I don't know if I was the cause of it, but you have to remember I grew up in Mangawai, which is at it's the south end of Northland. It just scrapes in as Northland. And
above the Mugamuka Bridge, they'd be going, she's an Aucklander.
Well, they'd be trying, but I'm not going to let myself become one of those. Not because I dislike them immensely, but it's not got the same grassroots understanding, has it? It's not quite the same rural perspective. I went to Rodney College in Wellsford. Only a few hundred kids there, and probably not particularly high decile. Rural communities in our area were not wealthy, and you'd know that. Northland is, not necessarily a super wealthy rural area. But they'd never run a program, and this sounds so wanky, for gifted children, but suddenly one appeared, and it was great because I finally got to think about some other things. I was really fortunate in that when I was in Standard 4, which is, what the heck's that, year 6 maybe, the principal at our small rural Mangawai school enabled us to do maths and other subjects at higher curriculum levels. And so by the time I got to high school, I'd actually done most of School C level curriculum. And so it was actually those first few years at high school was so boring. And I know there's loads of people like me have similar situations. And I have a real thing about extension of children and being able to keep them stimulated. But this is before we had computers, and you couldn't just go online and look something up and learn all about it, or do a mini course or anything. We didn't have that. You could read an encyclopedia, you could get a book out the library, but you actually had to be close to a library. and have those resources around you. So, probably for me, being able to be on the farm and apply my way of thinking to the farm environment and that ecosystem, I think that was also a big stimulus as well. So at school, I think it probably did show up, but I wasn't ducks. There was another guy at school who was very similar to me, more on the spectrum than probably I am. And he was phenomenal. And actually, I'm really grateful that I got to go to school with him, because I think we really helped each other a lot.
You're on the spectrum?
I think we all are, if we're in this space. Yeah, in some way. It's nothing to be ashamed of at all.
No, it wasn't.
I'm not. I don't have difficulty interacting with people or any of those things, but I think it's the way that your brain works, and you've just got to recognise it's not necessarily what others are familiar with. And so, therefore, it's very hard to describe and for other people to perceive the value of.
And then after school?
After school, university. So I always knew I was going to uni. Mum made that clear. Mum's a teacher by trade, but she left teaching when I was probably just before I was born to support Dad in the farming business. So they always worked as a partnership. And she always wanted to do something that her generation wasn't able to do, and not regretted it, but maybe there's a little bit of pining for that, what could have been, perhaps if times were different. And so it was pretty clear that was the path, just what was I going to do, and that changed all the time. So I actually went to university thinking I would head into pharmaceutical research. When I was younger, around sort of age 8 or 9, my uncle had leukemia, Dad's brother, and his children spent quite a lot of time with us. I think I probably understood the impact of that on them perhaps more than they did at the time. And I wanted to be able to fix it, because we couldn't fix it. And that's what sent me to uni, really, was to do that, something in the medical space. I thought maybe I could do pharmaceutical research and come up with a new solution for leukemia or other cancers. The problem with that is that, I got to that third year of my Bachelor of Science degree, and I did a physiology pharmacology double. And I realised, and I don't think it was intentional on their part, but again, it's a sign of the times, and some of it hasn't changed. The pharmacological industry and pharmaceutical industry and then was very focused on symptoms, not underlying cause, and weren't really looking at things holistically. And I couldn't honour that in my heart. It just didn't make any sense to me. And so I got to the end of that degree with this knowledge base and said, what the hell am I going to do now? Because I can't continue in this. It's just not right. So that ethical perspective that I have is really strong, and I have to listen to it, or I'm really unhappy. So I literally, at the end of that degree, sat there with the university, they call it calendar, I think, which has got the list of all of the courses, reading through all of the postgraduate degrees that I had the prerequisites for, and it was along the lines of medicine, audiology, and perhaps I could do a Master of Science, obviously, in some other space, or a Master of Environmental Science and looking at plant and animal toxicology or something like that. But I applied for all of them, but I think the world and the universe works in interesting ways, and I only received the approval, like acceptance into the course, for audiology. And they took 10 people. It was a newish course. I can remember one of the guys, I didn't have one of the prerequisites, which was physics, and he really didn't want me to be there because I didn't have this. And I can remember thinking, actually, I really want to be here, so I just pushed back and said, does it really matter that I don't? You don't think I can do it? And the other people around the table was, no, we don't mind. And he's thinking, oh, hell, I'm going to have to deal with it for 2 years. Oh, the poor guy. Anyway, Peter Thorne, I'm sorry. I think we did okay. So I did it. So I did audiology. And it's the best thing, honestly, the best thing that happened to me.
Because it's funny, of those lists, I would thought the last one, the environmental one, would have been the thing that really...
I would have done well in that too. I know I would, and I would have enjoyed it. And it would have, harked back to the rural upbringing and all of those things. But I think that desire to help people, I'm really glad about that. And I think there's an interesting balance, and I think things turn around too. People are the environment, and the environment is people. We can't really be one without the other. And I think that's where industry and efforts are going into now, and understanding that better. And I think Māori do that really well. And I'm not Māori, and I wish I understood some of that better, but I can't because I'm not. I can only work it from my own upbringing and my own family history and time on the land. And Dad's, like a fourth generation farmer in Mingwai. We've farmed that land since the 1870s or something, and it's really deeply ingrained. And I still walk that land every time I'm there, and it still means something. So I haven't lost it, but I don't have a qualification in it. And I don't think that matters. I think we can bring it all together.
So you went on to own your own audiology business,
mm-hmm.
and a number of businesses, and that went pretty well for you.
Yeah, it was great. I left university and moved to Te Awanga, Mount Maunganui, and worked for Bay Audiology, which is probably the best known audiology company in the country. And I worked with them for, I don't know, actually, maybe 6 years, something like that. And they went through some significant change in that time. We went through there was really interesting technological change that also occurred at the same time, not just in the audiology industry, but just in computing in general. And again, sometimes when things scale, the human aspect is lost. And I've got really strong beliefs and views on putting the person first and the patient first. And I didn't feel that environment was enabling me to do that adequately any longer, so I decided to do it myself and see if I could do it my way, or what I perceived to be my way. And it worked really well. I actually set up my own company, Clarity Hearing, as a model for franchise. We didn't have a franchise audiology company in New Zealand at the time. And so I was, looking at it from a systems perspective to see if I could run that model effectively here in the Bay, and then look at scaling elsewhere. That was always my plan. I had a business partner, Sandra, in Auckland, and she was following the same kind of model. And we did well out of that. And I really enjoyed that. What that made me understand really clearly was I have a really good eye for starting stuff up, understanding what needs to be put into place, understanding how to analyse the market, figure out where I should put a clinic, who are the people, what kind of way are we working together, all of the things around the customer journey and how to make that as smooth and effective as possible, etc. And I loved it, loved doing those things, loved starting things up. What I also came to understand is that I'm not so great once it's going well. I get bored and I'm looking for the next thing. So I ended up with a number of clinics. And part of my intention of going out on my own was, one, to see if I could do it, because I'd never done that before. And I'd done nothing in finance or economics at school either. I had none of that background. I had to teach myself everything. And I knew that I'd be having kids at some point too. So how do I do that effectively? Well, let's see if I can have a business that's operating successfully that allows me to be a mum, which is always my desire, and be quite present and available for my kids, and still generate an income. So we managed to do that quite effectively as well, and I was able to step back and let others, operate while I had the kids. And I wasn't ever intending to not do it. But then I had twins. So Eva, who's here today, is my eldest, and she's now 13. But I've got Sam and May, who are my twins, and they're 11. So I suddenly had 3 small people, 2 and under, and it really changed the picture for me. And there's always an event, right? That's the thing that drives innovation, isn't it? There's always something that will trigger it, one way or another.
Called conception.
Yeah, kids are overall leveler, aren't they? So it was like, holy hell. Okay, this is not quite what I was expecting. What do I do now? And the mum thing's really important. And I realised that I'd kind of saturated the local market in terms of audiology companies. I couldn't realistically open any more and expect them to do as well. And the industry was changing at the same time, and I could see that writing on the wall too. It was becoming vertically integrated, and independent audiology practices were probably going to be fewer for a period of time until population increased. And I think, a year and a half of very little sleep and what have you, thinking I need to focus on the small people. So I decided to sell and be mum, give myself some runway, let myself take a breather, see what I wanted to do next. And the beautiful thing about a profession like that is that you can fall back on it if you feel you need to. And I could go and do that now. I'd need to do some retraining, but I could still go back and do audiology. And I really loved it. It's an awesome intersection of humans and technology. And I love to play in that space. Sold to a company in Denmark, one of the largest hearing aid manufacturers in the world, with clinics all over the globe. And it was a really good move.
And so what was it like turning that switch off and becoming a stay-at-home mum?
Well, it only lasted 6 weeks. So my thoughts of having a couple of years to kind of figure out what I wanted to do next and see what came along, and maybe I'd just invest in, do a bit more angel investing, or maybe I'd pick up a governance role here or there, or because I'd been doing governance as well.
Bake some scones.
Oh, not me. I can bake, obviously, but it's not my favourite.
So 6 weeks. So
6 weeks, I think. And I was sitting at a swimming lesson, chatting to a parent next to me, a dad, who was telling me about these companies that he was supporting locally. He'd recently moved to the region from the UK and had left a business development role at Lockheed Martin. So he was looking for new innovation to see if he could, do something useful with it in a consultancy sense. And we got chatting about a particular company locally, and I started going, well, have they done this and have they done that, and have they thought about this and that? And you could see him going, shit, I never thought to ask those questions. And so the next swimming lesson, he rocked up with a different proposition, said, I've been talking to some people in Hamilton, they've got a technology that's really important for national security potentially. They need some business development kind of support with that, would you be interested? Which led to a meeting where we all got on like a house on fire. I totally understood the technology in a flash, thanks to my audiology background, and the way that sound is spectral, and from low to high frequency, different pitches, and this is in the X-ray space, and you can look at X-rays from low to high energy in the X-ray part of the spectrum as well. And if you look at them that way, you can put them into a computer chip and analyse them as data rather than analysing them as an image, which is how we traditionally think of X-rays. And it turns out you can do that. So you can look at an item without having to pull it apart and figure out chemically what's inside of it. And so we purchased this patent and technology from Ag Research, which is where... we formed a company. We decided to co-found a company, but it relied on us being able to extract that patent and IP from Ag Research, and we were able to negotiate that deal with them and secure it. But that's still in commercialisation. We've been on that path for a good number of years and for all sorts of reasons, but it is deep tech. It requires some really interesting hardware. That's not easy and it's not cheap. It's quite different from what others are doing in terms of the way it's designed. And we know this based on some false, we've made some mistakes here and there, which is what you learn from. And it's great. I'm loving it. It's still got massive potential.
And when this thing comes to life, what's it going to do?
Well, it's a bit of like tiger by the tail kind of thing, because it can have application across many markets, but it's like a new generation of X-rays. So moving away from imagery and into spectral is the only way to get more information from X-rays. There's a limitation to what you can get from an image, and it's to do with the technology that you use to get the images, basically, and the way you analyse the information. The best customer example that you'd relate to is in security screening in airports. Obviously, they're still concerned about terrorism. It's a major issue. Things in Afghanistan hotted that up again recently. And everyone's very aware of this, how slow things are. And you stand in queues forever and you have to unpack all your things and all the rest of it. So, because
it still looks, through my eye, it still looks really basic and hasn't changed for a long time.
There hasn't been a lot of change, but they are trying their best it's that incremental innovation that you typically get when something's nearing the end of its life. You know, they've kind of tried everything they can, but sometimes the hardware's the limitation, you know, and they really need a complete rethink. But when you've been in an industry for, you know, maybe 60 years, it's very difficult to think about it differently because you're so wedded to that. And it's probably that Kodak versus, digital camera kind of space, potentially again. And we're just at the very beginning of this. So with this assuming it comes to be, you don't need to unpack anything. And we'll be able to find what we're looking for that's targeted without needing to unpack everything.
And it'll be more
accurate. And so it'll be
quicker.
Way more accurate, way quicker. No humans required because it's artificial intelligence driven. It can run 24/7 kind of thing, you know. So one of the biggest issues with current technology is the human factor, and that's another piece you can't really change. And in that particular market, the people that are doing that screening are not high paid, and they have massive churn. So it's a huge issue for that industry too.
And so that's one application, but you see this could be adapted for a whole lot of things.
Yeah, we'd really like to at some point explore the medical application of this, and whether how effective it could be in that space compared to CT, for instance. It's just a different way of. I don't think it would get rid of CT because I think there's always going to be a requirement for specialists and others to look at something and understand the physiology and the anatomy. But from a chemical angle, what else are we able to glean and learn that a technology like this could provide that would add to that health picture? So that's something I'd love to look at. But, there's probably applications across, it's all transportation, not just aviation, venues, events, all those kinds of things as well, in a security context, but also perhaps minerals, oil and gas exploration, those kinds of things, which may be less relevant with our environmental focus, but we'll see.
There'll always be something that people will be looking for.
And I'm not suggesting for a minute that we will look to do all of those things ourselves,
yep.
Right? But we do need to get it to market somewhere first, most effectively, and then we can, talk to the people who are best suited to take it further.
Maria, what does your week, a typical week, look like for Maria?
Is there such a thing? I think that's one of the things I do love about the way I've got fingers in lots of different pies, but I don't need them in all of those pies all at the same time usually. And so I kind of try and run myself at about a 95% capacity, and it varies from week to week depending on what company's doing what at the time, and that's between my own ones and the ones that I'm a director for. Or a trustee for, and the children, of course, and friends, and sport. So it doesn't always look the same. Typical week, Monday mornings I used to keep so that I could try and get the house clean after the kids have been there for the weekend. It's been the whirlwind, but that's just been taken up because I've taken on a new director shareholder role with a company locally, and so I'm in there on Mondays with them. There's a bit more focus in a couple of the other director roles too, because I've just been appointed chair of XERA, which is the Earth Observation Institute, so a little more touch points for that, and going through some really interesting challenges around getting to a point of sustainability as a company in a short time, transitioning out of the government funding space that we've been in for a few years and looking to try and go it alone. But the runway's short, the time frame's short, and there's a lot to do and shift. So at the moment, probably it's weighted probably almost a little more towards my governance roles than my own companies. But at the same time, we're building another prototype. So, that's going to crank up again shortly too. I don't know, Harv. It's a hard question to answer. When do I work? Anything from between 5 in the morning and midnight, just depending on what feels I'm most inspired to do. And you can biff in a bit of coaching and mentoring here and there as well, where I've got a bit of space.
And then you've got to balance this thing called kids.
Yep.
As well.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that?
Kids come with me to loads of things. If I can't jam the stuff into 9 to 3, one way or another, and it sounds like I'm rushing woman, but I'm not. I'm very conscious of picking up what I'm focused on, doing it really well, putting it down and picking up the next thing. Even if my brain might be working on stuff in the background, I'm always present. I had to learn how to do that. But the kids, Eva's a good example this week. She's been off school all week, and I don't know how many different meetings she's come to me with. But nearly everyone that I interact with is used to me having the kids with me. And even when they were babies, I'd rock up with them in their, carry cot things from the car. And people would have such a horrified look on their face. What the hell is this woman meant to do anything sensible, logical, or otherwise when she's got these 2 babies with her? But you do, because there wasn't any other option. It's just the way I roll. They're with me. They're part of my life. They come to my sport. I go to their sport. Everybody's trying to chipping in together. And it's almost, it's a bit of that community thing again. We're reliant on one another and we support one another. So, I don't know. It's a good question, but this is just the way we do it, and it works for us.
And I had the pleasure of interviewing Eva before the podcast, and asked her to give you a mark out of 10. You got an 8 out of 10.
I know, it's like nearly gold star.
I thought that's pretty good. That's
for a
pretty
tell you that.
10,
and I wasn't giving her the evil eye or anything either. That was voluntary.
And look, I'd like to touch on this because it was, I've met your kids, and you've obviously got you've got a really strong bond, right? But they seem pretty happy in their own skin and themselves, and they're pretty good with hanging out with mum. Because you parent basically by yourself?
Yeah. Well, I do live alone with the children. Paul, my ex-husband, is not too far away, but he isn't with them quite as often. So, but we call each other siblings. That's kind of how our relationship is. So, and it works probably better than it did when we were married. And we, he will turn up or I will turn up at his house. It just seems to work really well. It's not usual, probably. There's no angst, there's no nasties, nothing. It's just like we've been mates forever. And that's worked brilliantly for the kids because it's not felt destabilised or anything like that. No, it's been excellent.
And when I asked Eva, how could you get a higher score than 8? It was more freedom on her iPad and so forth. I thought that was a great answer.
It's always the answer of children, isn't it? They want more access tech-wise to things. Look, I think you only get one chance to be a child, and you only have that one chance of some level of innocence and just the joy of being a kid and that curiosity and ability to explore your surroundings and know how to get on with one another and entertain yourselves and think about things. And if you're constantly in front of a screen, for one, you don't have to think so much anymore. And perhaps, but it's different. I think it's a different kind of thinking. It's prompted thinking, probably. And I don't know. I just think when they're, this age, Eva's probably getting to the point where there's the ability to have more freedom, but I'm sit on the end of the spectrum of protect them a bit. They're just not mature enough to make all the right calls most of the time, and there are some bad actors out there, and the kids just don't need to see things. You can't unsee things, and you just don't know with any young child how they're going to respond to that. And I think there's a lot of nasty stuff in the world, and it's not so much cotton wooling, it's just a time and place. And so that's the angle I take. So the kids will ask me, can I have such and such an app or a game or what have you? And I'll read all the reviews. And the thing that usually stops me from saying yes is not whether there's gore or, someone's, killing someone else in some gaming world. It's more around the access to communications and the international servers where anybody can comment and they can interact with people from all around the world. And I just don't think that's appropriate for kids this age.
So as a tech mother to other parents listening to this, what's your advice?
Read a lot. Check, keep an eye, have access. You don't, the kids know that I can look at their iPads anytime. They know I can check through things. Sure, they could try and delete them, but I'll know that too. I don't look every day or every week necessarily, don't listen either. But I keep an eye on it. And I also keep an eye on who the contacts are at this point too. And what the sort of the tone is. So I think you need to be quite observant, and you need to be engaged, and you need to be able to have the conversations about why things are, so that they understand it. And sure, I know my son the other day was saying he was being teased because he didn't have Discord. But at 11, does he need Discord? I don't think so. My view.
Interesting. I had a conversation with a member recently. He's got 2 teenage sons, and he was talking about, and they're both at secondary school, I'm not sure. One's definitely at secondary school, maybe one's about to start, but around the conversation around pornography for, the access with kids and how it is messing kids up.
Yeah, I follow a group in Australia called Collective Shout, and the lady that leads that, I happened to attend a presentation she made in Te Awanga years ago when the kids were babies, because I've observed that and read things online about that too, and I've followed them ever since. And it is, the sexualisation of youth is quite extreme. Some of the reports that come out of the FBI around pedophiles and accessing children, and I mean, they're really skilled at this. It's their craft, it's their profession, and it doesn't matter how smart you think your child is or how worldly wise they are. I don't think they would, have any chance against them. And I don't think they need to be exposed to those things really young. But even Instagram, which so many kids have now, has got, massive issues. But the tech giants, the Facebooks of the world, they just don't know how to deal with this. They've created these platforms, they're being used in ways they weren't expecting. And here we are. So as parents and as citizens, we have to take the actions that we perceive to be the most suited to our families, our situations. And I don't apologise for the decisions I make. Yeah.
Maria, it's interesting, we're in a space at the moment with companies like Facebook, who, if you look through one lens, you'd say it was one of the most successful companies the world's seen. And if you look through a different lens, you'd say they're one of the most unsuccessful companies the world's ever seen.
Yeah, what metric are you using?
And it's looking at, your values with the startup and impact and cause and people, Mark Zuckerberg would have put those down originally as well, right?
Mm-hmm, probably true.
And, I've heard people on podcasts talking about, they think he's a great guy and so forth, but I look at what Facebook is doing and knowing they're doing and causing this so much unrest at the moment.
We're in a really interesting space as global citizens anyway right now. COVID's changed things too, but the companies are inadvertently, I don't think they were ever created with this kind of position in mind. And I think with any technology, it can be used almost dual purpose. They talk about from commercial and intelligence, but dual purpose for good or bad, depending on your perspective. And of course, those who are perhaps using it the way we'd perceive as bad are actually thinking this is great for me. They don't perceive that as bad necessarily because they're reaping benefits from it. So it all comes down to perspective. Where were we talking about though? Like, you've lost me. I've forgotten where my train of thought was going now.
I was just talking about with Facebook, with companies, depending on the lens you look through, right? Whether, Facebook, through one lens, most successful company, another lens, most unsuccessful
Yeah, I
company.
think there's a lot of social harm that they wouldn't have anticipated. What is the level of social responsibility? I read a newsletter the other day from an interesting guy in the States who knows them, has worked with them in the past, and is sort of indicating that he thinks, Mark et al. Will just be walking away shortly, saying this is actually just too hard. People, you're too hard. But people are people, and we've got polarisation and there's so much unrest across so many things, everybody taking umbrage at everything else. There's no neutrality, there's no balance, it seems, at the moment. We get pendulum swings, but usually they kind of all head in one direction and then come back to the middle, but we've got pendulum swinging in all directions, all at the same time. So it is very chaotic, and this is something that's talked about all the time. We're in a chaotic space, and there's a lot of uncertainty. I love uncertainty because that's where innovation happens. It doesn't bother me at all. But it bothers most people. Most people would say that having certainty is really core to them, being able to predict what's coming next. And, the thought of having a week like mine, which is full of all sorts of different things and can change at the last minute, would freak them out probably. But I don't mind that. But I can see how disruptive and how much harm it's causing to so many others. And I think then you look at other metrics. So we've got increase in mental health issues, and we've got climate issues and anxiety, like just so many other things are coming to the fore, and everything's contributing. You could never point to one thing, and so therefore it makes it seem very difficult to solve. So how do you solve that? And that's the challenge, right? And I think we have to come back to us being individuals and living our best lives ourselves and making choices separate from kind of what's around you, and more of a, choosing to look at a situation more neutrally and then deciding what your reaction's going to be, and how much benefit that reaction's going to have to you and your immediate family, and then coming back into community and working on things that matter to you, and making the changes that you can, because I still believe the ripples create big waves. But taking the perspective of I'm really angry and I'm also, and not that that's invalid, but I'm really angry and I'm also feeling hopeless and I can't do anything myself, doesn't change anything other than how you feel inside. So what's the action? What's the inspired action that you can take as a result of feeling those things? So turn it around and put it into something that's going to have positive impact, even if it's just on yourself, because that will matter and impact those around you, even if you're unconsciously doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. Enough. That was nice of you at the beginning, Maria. That's all used up now.
Why does it not make sense?
Come
on.
No. So I'm actually thinking here.
Oh, are you? Okay, sorry, I'll shush.
Yeah, I know you haven't seen it before, but it's a new thing. I'm trialling it. Maria, I am, trying new skills on Facebook at the moment of trying to engage in some difficult conversations from time to time and seeing how it goes. And I've got to say I'm not very good at it. And because I just want to make them wrong, right? And there's a whole raft of, naturally, that's what I want to do. When I say naturally, that's the little boy inside me, right? Okay? Not defending
Being
it.
Provocative.
No, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'm just really pissed off. So
Okay.
There was one yesterday around, a guy made a comment around, he was baiting me on a racist thing, right? So he was coming from a racist point of view. And this morning I said, look, this conversation's over. I said, that this is not something that I want to carry on, and just left the conversation. And didn't get nasty at any point, but, it was interesting. He asked me a very closed question, and I just went, no. He went, no what? And I was going to put no thank you, you dick, right? But I didn't. I just went, I'm just answering your question. That's a no. And because he was sort of leading me down the path.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. I do wonder if social media is going to survive and that it's so harmful, whether we're going to let this thing, and it feels like we've created this thing that we don't have the maturity, society doesn't have the maturity to cope with this cocaine.
Yeah, it's interesting, that one. Will it survive? Well, I think it will. I think it will just evolve.
And so then talking about Discord, I was on a call last week looking at a Discord conversation, and it was one of these DAOs, decentralised,
Mm-hmm.
what do they call them, autonomous organisation,
Mm-hmm.
following a conversation there, and I'm going, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And going, this is next generation. When people come on board, good morning, they start with a good morning. Going, look at all these good mornings, coming out. And I looked at this and went, wow, this is really healthy.
Yeah, and I think Facebook has is the most common one when you think of social, and it's to have the same opportunities to be used, but in that way, Discord as well. But at the same time, if you're, depending on how you're engaging with it, it comes from the angle that you're trying. That's the intentionality behind the use. So there are Facebook groups that I belong to that are immensely positive, like your Discord conversation, across all sorts of different things, and you just don't see anything. And it's a brilliant community, and it's global, and you're accessing, many brains rather than what you might just have in your local network. Those things, if it doesn't exist on that platform, it will go somewhere else because there's so much value derived from that. The negative things, I think, again, it's a choice. Do you decide it's a value add to you to stay there and observe it and read it and see it, or not? I do read a lot, but I don't read a lot of news unless I choose to. So I actively chose to disengage from the news some years back, maybe even 10 years ago. Stop watching the 6 o'clock, stop listening on the hour, stop reading the paper other than if it happened to be somewhere and I was there to read it. But I would, one, always hear about it from my network, so it pops up everywhere if it's something important you need to know. And two, I've got active searches that are feeding me in the different areas of science and technology and engineering and all the things that I like and are intrigued by, and it's coming to me, so I'm choosing it. So will it survive? I think it will. Will it evolve? Probably. How do you engage with it? That's up to you.
Right.
So you have to have responsibility for yourself.
And look, the most amazing group I've seen is one that my wife Kate's involved in. It's called Women in Medicine. It's New Zealand focus, I think, but I know there are doctors from other. That thing is just the most amazing source of information and sharing, and they're having a conversation on there right now about how do we deal with family members who are not vaccinated at Christmas.
Yep.
Right? And this is high quality conversation. And I've seen a number of COVID conversations that Kate has shared with me. I'm going, this is class. This is absolute, but it's all women. I'm going, I wonder if that's a key, that, there's no men in there or whatever. But I look at that and go, that is wonderful use of that platform.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully more. Hopefully there'll be more and more of that. But I think you do see a lot of those as closed groups and private groups, and they're privately run and there are rules and someone's moderating or the group is moderating in some way. So, you might get someone who's with an activism or a particular axe to grind, but if you start to move outside of what that community is deciding if you use your DAO example, so everybody's kind of contributing to the governance of that group and as an equal participant, it allows the space to be safe to share all sorts of things. But if someone's totally going off track, they're either going to be gently encouraged back and loved, for the transgression, if that's the way of describing it, or if it's persistent behaviour, then you'd take other action, and you have the ability to do it. Yeah, so I think those platforms and those groups, and it won't be the only one Kate's involved in, and they're all going to be feeding her something beneficial and adding value to her own practice, to her own resilience, to her own well-being, and I just hope there's more and more of that.
Can we touch on your view of where we're heading with COVID from a science background, Maria?
Viruses continually evolve, so I don't think COVID's finished with us yet necessarily. Be interesting to see how much it changes over the next period, especially with vaccinations, whether it takes a different turn, how effective those vaccinations are and into the future, what that looks like, how the unvaccinated fare with it. I think the testing regime will change, and I think we'll get a lot more rapid, cheap tests become available, not just for COVID. I think it will have sparked for perhaps others that are adjacent as well, in a similar vein. But I think the piece that is yet to come is the therapeutics, which is the treatments for those diseases. A lot of work being done in that space, and the big pharmaceutical companies are announcing therapeutics being put out in the market now. They may not be the best ones. We'll have to wait and see. I know there's a lot of concern about how rapidly things have been brought to the market. And I think there's a certain level of, because of that uncertainty, you've kind of had to accept it a little bit as well. And I think that's where society is. We're better off trusting the work that's been done on the whole to be right for humankind and with the best of intentions than not. And I think therapeutics they will be the future. I think we'll have drugs. So, Eva's sick. She's rapidly tested, looked like she's got COVID. Here, take this. Done. That's where we'll end up. Whether it smashes it out altogether and we don't see it ever rear its head again, questionable. But I think that therapeutics is the next piece.
I should have asked you this question before we started to get permission, but I'm just going to drop it anyway. So, have you been vaccinated?
Yes, I have, yeah. So, in a perfect rosy-tinted world, I don't think anyone would choose to be vaccinated necessarily. But when you weigh everything up, what things do you truly value in your own life? And one of the things I truly value is freedom of choice. I cannot stand being forced to do something. You should know that. And I will balk against it and ask why and try and change it if I don't think it's right and all those things. Don't throw a hissy, but, that's how it feels inside. And added to that picture, my mum's actually quite unwell with cancer at the moment. And so I really want to be able to see her and with the least possible risk. So those two things, freedom and, care of others, led me to deciding to be vaccinated.
And at the moment we've got people marching, wanting freedom. It's an interesting paradigm.
I think we just have to wait a little while and things are going to have to change again. So whatever people's decisions have been, as individuals you can make whatever decision you want. I can understand the reasons from a health system perspective for wanting people to be vaccinated and wanting to protect the very young children and those who are unwell and can't be vaccinated, for example, who are most at risk from COVID. But at the same time, people should still be able to have a choice and not be forced to do anything. And that's a really scary, slippery slope if it continues. But I don't believe it will. I think it will change. And I think that's because the citizens will not allow it, because there's plenty of people who have been vaccinated who don't agree with the mandate either.
Yep, the mandate was, it was when they came out, and I took a deep breath and went, oh.
And I went, thank goodness I'm not practising any longer, because it's really difficult. It's really difficult with staff. There's so many unknowns yet in this. I can't see it lasting too long. I just don't think it's workable.
And then I heard a different view from a doctor recently who said, but we drive to the speed limits mandated by the government. We are not allowed to drink alcohol and drive mandated by the government. There's lots of things that have been mandated by the government, right, and just set down. And we accept those, right? And I thought, I hadn't thought of that. Because when I was a kid, people drinking drunk was a badge of honour. I mean, my parents having a party and so-and-so was driving absolutely plastered and whatever, and everybody thought it was, thumbs up, what a great guy.
Yep, was the norm.
That was the norm, right? And now people just go thinking, no, you can't do that. And so this doctor said, it's been mandated to protect the majority from a few. That's what it's there for. And I thought, what do you think about that?
Is it quite the same? I'm not sure. I can feel myself trying to see two sides to that story, and I don't know if I have a really coherent answer for you. It's an interesting perspective.
And they're definitely not the same because you're not putting anything in your body.
No, you're not. But you're still following society, a broad societal agreement, I suppose. And maybe there's an aspect of that in this, that there's fear of, is this the start of something?
Right. And
perhaps that's also a piece around the state of society as a whole and the volatility and the polarisation that we're experiencing. Perhaps there is a greater level of distrust in the structures of government, and people are rebelling or more prepared to rebel than they may have been in the past. I think there's a whole lot of other factors that come into play. So I'm not sure if they were looking to decrease the speed limit more or something all of a sudden, with no good reason, would people react? Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to imagine the same sorts of things being put into place right now at this time in history. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can really compare.
And then it's interesting to think that COVID is a blip compared to the climate change coming down the track at us and the loss of biodiversity and all that sort of stuff that we've got to cope with. And is COVID just a really good test run for what we've got coming down the track?
I think humans are incredibly resilient, and I think we're incredibly resourceful, and I think we're incredible contributors. That's my baseline for humanity. And I think we're always able to come up with a way. And either it's living with something most effectively, if that's what COVID is, we'll come out with a way to live with it most effectively. And look at the amount of innovation that's happened in less than 2 years. It's incredible. So when people really put the dollars behind it and really put the effort and resourcing behind it, you can really shift the needle on something. But there's got to be a pain point. And this is the same thing with business. You can have the best damn product in the whole world that looks amazing and that everybody says they want, but do they really need it? Will their lives be significantly impacted if they don't have it? And then the second thing is, what is it going to cost them? So if you can't line all of those things up and validate it adequately, that it's really painful and it really needs to be done differently, it won't happen. And so with climate change, I feel like that's part of it, that perhaps not enough people yet perceive that there's great enough need to put all resources behind it. It's been talked about for a long time now. And yet where are the shifts really happening? But there is a great deal of focus on, and there's some awesome technology being developed that's raising awareness and improving all sorts of things in an environmental context, which is I'm super excited about. Like the Great Ocean Cleanup. Have you seen them? Love it. Absolutely brilliant.
And the thing that gives me great hope is this word regeneration. Mm-hmm. When you see nature regenerate itself, if it's given a chance, you just go, look at that, it's fabulous.
Yeah. And so I think if we're all able to, We might not be able to change our own carbon footprint. I kind of hate the terminology. It's because it's everywhere. But if we do look at what we can change and change it as much as we're able, every little bit will help. And it comes back to that ripple piece again. Don't assume you can't have an impact. You can. And whether it's just the tiny things you do at home or the way you interact with your environment, to the products that you purchase and being conscious of where they've come from and the provenance of those, and all those different pieces will come back into it. But the ability to be regenerative one way or another, I think, is, that's ecosystems in action. That's how they work. They're complex. There's many moving parts, and they adapt. All those different pieces adjust to compensate for one another. And so my great hope is that Earth has got the capacity itself as a massive ecosystem to moderate so that life can be sustained. Will that happen? Hard to know. But there's such variation over such long periods of time. There's nothing to say it can't.
Maria, we need to wrap up soon because you're going to have to pick up kids.
You're right.
Right, so responsible me was looking.
I'd forgotten all about it.
And I was looking. I thought Maria's in the flow, and I'm looking at the time, going at some point. So I just thought I'd bring that up now. I will carry on all afternoon talking to you. All right. So you determine when. What time should we finish?
Oh, you've got a wee bit more time.
Have we?
Yep, if you want to, unless you're bored.
I've been bored for a long time already. So, Maria, what does the future hold? And I'm just going to go back to the things here that you love startup, you love making impact, you love a cause,
yep,
and you love people.
Yep, love complexity.
And love complexity.
I like it when it's a challenge. Yep. Can I fix it? Can I figure it out? What do I need to know? Where do I pull that from? Who do I need? Where do I get them from? What do they need to do? There's so many pieces to that. Love it.
And what are you like in a team?
Oh, my goodness. Probably annoying at some levels because I ask questions.
You're definitely annoying.
And I have this this intuitive way of operating where I can't always explain my thought process well, but I get like a knowing of something that matters, and it's usually around, well, if I'm with people, it's something to do with the way that they interact themselves, or what's stopping them perhaps from interacting in their best possible version. And somehow, my mum calls it people whisperer. I managed to get people to work together really effectively. And I can't really explain how that happens, but it's rare for it not to work well. Do I make mistakes from time to time? Of course, but I'm getting better at it all the time. And mostly it's because I'm choosing to listen to that kind of internal, intuitive knowing piece around people. And it's worked in my favour. It sounds a bit airy-fairy and woo-woo, I know that, but it just works. And so that's what I now find I bring to teams the most. And the questions of, have we thought of this, or where's that coming from, or why do you say that, and how does that fit together, and where are we, prompting all the time as well. Does that sound like your experience of me in a CQ team? Yeah. As I said earlier on, you're the most fucking frustrating person, and sorry. She's not listening. She's not listening, it's good. But it's absolutely... and you've seen the impact you've had on me, Maria, and I'm just like, in the very last meeting, you made it good. I just tossed everything up in the air. You were really pissed off. I was. I thought I'd figured it out. And I'm just going back to square one again. Well, you weren't back to square one again at all, because you'd come such a long way already. We jumped 1.5 miles, and like quantum leaping is what we were doing, Harv. And it's interesting
that, look, it took me a long time to work you out. I'm not saying I've worked you out. It took me a long time to understand your superpower.
Well, I'd like to know what you think it is.
It's knowing shit. Right? It's knowing stuff. I think as well. I think you've got a number of them. But that's one of the things. And it's this, your ability to ask, see things and ask these questions, right? And the most profound question you asked me was, or got me to imagine that I was treating collective intelligence like a traditional farmer, and you got my imagination what would happen if I thought of it like a regenerative farmer, right? And didn't sleep for 6 weeks because of you, because it was just like, it just got under my skin. I couldn't get rid of it. Yeah.
Because it was right.
Yes.
And
yes.
you knew it, but you has a part of that probably when you kick yourself saying, why didn't I see it myself?
No, I didn't actually.
You didn't kick yourself?
No, not at all. What I didn't lost sleep over was that as soon as you said that, I thought, Maria's onto this. And what does that mean? Right? And what does that mean? And then what am I going to do with this? And yeah, and it was a Friday morning, doodling, but it was 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then when it came to me, it was really, really simple. It was just like this whole weight lifted off me, which is, we're in that process now, and I won't go into it because it's not my podcast, but huge, huge impact, right? And I look at that from a governance point of view, that skill that you have, and I wonder how long it takes before people understand what they've got. Right?
Of me?
Yeah.
I think people struggle. I think on paper it's not the same. It's experiential almost, and I completely understand that. And I don't wish to stop doing what I'm doing at all, but I do struggle to find the words to describe it in a way that people can comprehend, and I think it's through examples, and it seems like such a simple thing, just asking that question, but it just was such a clear vision for me, and that was pulling together and distilling a great deal of information that, in that particular situation that we had received, and also me deeply caring about people and having taken the time to try and understand you as a person prior to that too. Because when you kind of understand where people have come from, what makes them tick, there's all bits of data and intelligence in there, which sounds, very linear, but it's not, that you then feed into pictures when you're solutioneering, and I don't even know that I'm doing that, to come up with what to me that was obviously a way of taking collective intelligence into a new phase, solving the problems that you felt you were experiencing that others had described that they were experiencing as well, and that you deeply understood in your heart, because that's the kind of way that you live. It's your way of being. And so it all lined up. And so I suppose it's a gift to you, but being able to apply that same kind of process to other scenarios is really important to me.
And that question, if you were quantifying it, was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or more, right? And there was a team around you that you were working within the team, you weren't dominating it, and it was interesting because there was that and the question from Hans Kim of where is this thing going, right? Those two pieces there were it. Everything else, I'm not saying it didn't matter.
No, but that was the pinnacle of all of it, right?
Those were the two big
everything
rocks.
had reached that point.
Yep. And it was one of those things of getting more from less, because those two things were going, right. And that's what we've worked on for the rest of the year.
And it's completely changed you.
Yep, absolutely. But this podcast is about you.
Sorry.
And so I'm really interested to see going forward that when people start to understand the magic of what you do, And maybe they don't have a name. Maybe it's just the Maria King factor, right? But you and I know it's a thing, and that might feel uncomfortable for you. For me, I'm okay with making you feel uncomfortable. It's good. It's payback time, right? But yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I love it, and I do a lot for love. So I participated in that because I cared. I think you rang me, I don't know, a few weeks back, asking something else that was a follow-on from that. And that, just an example, that particular day I'd had 5 CEOs ring me that morning seeking advice. None of them I charge for their advice, those particular people, because I just care that they, how do you monetize something that you can't describe for a start? There's all sorts of questions around that. And I'm the entrepreneur. I should be able to figure that out, right? Can't even do it myself. But sometimes part of community is the give and supporting other people to be the best that they can be. And if I can do that in a 5-minute conversation and it makes a massive difference to that person and their entire business, their staff, their customers, blah, 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 awesome. I don't care that I don't get the recognition. I've always described myself as a walk alongside or walk behind person rather than a lead from the front. That may change over time. Perhaps as the lead from the front personalities that people perceive as being valuable shift from the very strong ego-driven, more kind of lion domain to perhaps those that are more gentle in their way. Not strong, just more gentle. And I welcome that too, but I'm not going to stop doing those things to try and make the most impact I can have in the life I've got. And by the way, I'm living till I'm at least 105, so there's a long time to go yet, and lots of things to do, because I decided that a long time ago.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
And what are you doing? What are you putting in place in your life to live to 105?
It's consciousness and deliberate choice. It's living your truth in a very authentic way. We talked earlier about the strong emotions that you can experience. I can have anger, I can have extreme happiness, all the spectrums, but I don't dwell in those that I perceive to be more negative by choice. I let those kind of roll through me. And then look for the opportunity in there, because it's just the way I work. So, okay, that's made me angry. Why? Okay, what can I do about that? What feels like the right thing to do now? And sometimes it's going to have a sleep, and other times it's actually, this is what I need to do, and I get on with it. It's engaging with many people, because I think people and community and society keep you going. It's the food choices you make, it's the exercise, and it's that balance across all of it. But most of it is doing the stuff that matters every day. Do the stuff that matters every day. And love deeply, no matter what it is, person or thing, or work.
Maria, that is a great way to end this podcast, right? Because I'm thinking we're going to stop now. Because that is just a wonderful summary. Do the stuff that matters every day. Yeah?
Yep.
Maria, good luck.
Thanks, Harv.
With the future, with the stuff, with the kids, and with your work and living to 105.
At least. At
least. And it's funny you say that again. Yep. Cool. Tick, got that. And thank you for supporting me. You've made a huge difference in my life. You know that, and I've told you that. And I do feel very blessed having you in my life, because you kick my ass, you annoy me, and I trust you. Yeah.
Oh, that's mutual.
So, Maria, thank you.
Thanks, Harv.
I'm going to stop now, and you can go back to being a mother.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
You've just been listening to an episode of Stuff That Matters Now, brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fun stuff, the rugged stuff, and the complete stuff-ups that have helped this particular collective intelligence member evolve while making the world a better place. Do check out our Stuff That Matters Now podcast series on your favourite podcast provider or visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz to get links to new episodes. Contact us if you want to learn more about how we can help you evolve yourself and others. Thanks for listening.